Welcome to my teaching learning session. We continue with BPCS 184 School Psychology. School Psychology as the prime block, we move to block 2 and unit 2, which talks about now human development. As we understand that school psychology is not only something which is practiced in our school premises, but also equally a part of psychology which is growing in leaps and bounds. You can be looking forward in terms of careers, can be looked in forward in terms of building a career, uh, having your own set of design in mind with school psychology. Now moving to human development and its part, what are we going to do in unit 2 is introduction. We are going to talk about issues and themes of developmental psychology, nature and nurture issue, which is the prime issue of development, the continuous and discontinuous as an issue of development, stability and change. We are equally going to speak about lifespan development, the principles of lifespan development, some individual differences which we always need to know, as human lives and living always has differences when speaking about development. And what are these differences which are being caused in development? The reason behind these individual differences is heredity and environment. And coming to the last points of the unit would be the role of heredity, which is genetic inheritance, and the role of environment that we are going to speak about in unit 2. Speaking of issues, first let's understand what is developmental psychology. Developmental psychology and lifespan development stands out to be same. It talks about development that starts from conception and goes on till the end of the time, which is till the time that we lose ourselves into the earth, which is we die. So this is going to be developmental psychology or lifespan development, referring to the fact that it is developmental changes that we see physically, socially, emotionally, educationally, cognitively, and body wise from conception till death. We need to know that lifespan development is always going to be progressive. If talking about quality, not quantity, lifespan development and developmental psychology says that development is always very progressive. It's different from growth, it's different from maturation. Now, we speak about there are some major issues that we need to speak about when talking about developmental psychology. The first is nature and nurture. When we speak about the issues and themes, that considers that what are the issues in terms of what are the problems that we find in developmental psychology when we are dealing, when we are studying, when we're putting up researches in this field. The first is nature and nurture, which is a constant discussion in the field of psychology for various other psychologies, which we talk about not only human development, but also when we talk about abnormal psychology, when we talk about general psychology, always there's a controversy between nature and nurture. Nature is the hereditary influences that includes your physical characteristics like intellectual capacity, personality traits, also the pattern of social interaction. Nature also speaks about that we get all of these physical characteristics from our parents. So it is a genetic influence that goes from the parents to the offspring. On contrary, we have another issue along with the nature, which actually becomes controversial, which is nurture. Nurture is a concept that speaks about anything that encompasses all of the developmental outcomes in an individual, which is anything which is of the nurture, something which is nurturing us as environment. So anything which is lying beside us, which could be temperature, it could be situational characteristics, it could be something which was jams, the traffic jams, it could also be the environmental calamities that we go through. So that is something that we speak about nurture. Nature, on the other hand, are physical characteristics which are innate, something that we are carrying from our parents to offspring. So the first controversy was that our development has a concern that is it primarily nature or it is nurture. Then we talk about continuous and discontinuous issues that addresses how developmental issues, all the developmental issues that are being addressed on the manifestation of a smooth progression, or it is happening in distinct stages. That suggests the continuous and discontinuous conflict is about the fact that is our development always continuous, that is, we do not break down in the middle, or it is happening in distinct phases and stages. That is one stage, then another stage, and another stage. This kind of issue can be depicted in the theories of psychology of human development. So we suggest that discontinuity means distinctive stages and continuity means progression, which is continuous in nature and does not break down any time. So, proponents of continuous development claims that development is gradual and cumulative, which is it keeps happening with the passage of time and it happens together. So there is no break. It happens together. It's collectively taking place. That each developmental event includes builds, event builds upon the later development, which is anything which has happened as a 3 and 4 will be the base for the year 4, and anything that happens to 5 years of a child will be coming from the base of a 4 year of development. That means any happenings in the earlier stages impacts your later stages. For example, of a continuous development could be instances of physical growth such as height. So for example, if a child is already gaining height at the stage of 4 5 years, we usually say that there has been a very potentially high growth of the child. And similarly, if a 3 year old child does not gain height, we usually feel that the trend of the child is the same. At 4, they might not grow much. At 5, they might not grow much. So is the healthy peer relationship in adolescent can be traced back to the parent-child relationship. Scholars is also emphasized on distinctive and abrupt changes. So researchers themselves have stated that development is equally discontinuous. When we speak about the concept of discontinuous, does not mean that it's breaking down. It means that the development is happening in stages. There is this distinct stage one, which will differ from stage two, which will differ from stage three. So it's going to be distinct and abrupt changes, which are both qualitative experiences that are different from each stages. So something as a child at 3 years of age will have a very different development than a child of a 5 year old age, and then a child of a 6 year old age. So this is something which they stated distinctive also is something that plays an important role in development. So discontinuity approach actually favors stage theories, theories which have stage development, theories that rely on different stages, theories that rely on stage one, two, three, four, five would be something which is favored by the discontinuous issues. Theories which do not have stages. Ideally, human development itself does not have much theories, which is based on the continuity issue. We are ideally based on the discontinuity issues because we are working in stages. There are stages for 1 and 2, 3 years of development, then 3 and 4, then 4 and 5, then 6 and 7. So we ideally are favoring the qualitative experiences which are distinct and abrupt from one stage to the other. So this is another issue and theme of research that happens to be in human development. One of the last theme and issue here is stability versus change. That says this issue is concerned with itself with the degree to which early traits and characteristics persist throughout or can be subject to change. That means a lot of psychologists and experts emphasize on the fact that stability in the development adopt the nativistic perspective, asserting that the role of inheritance in the development of traits and characteristics. That means there were people who were nativist, and there are people who were empiricists. Empiricists were researchers which build it upon psychology to be scientific, psychology to be numeric, quantitative. Nativist stated that it's the genetic inheritance, it's the qualitative changes, it cannot be quantified. So nativist emphasized that stability is adopted by our role being emphasized on the genetic inheritance. That means we have stable changes in our human development, and the result of that stability is the genetic inheritance. The reason we look down our heredity, which is our chain of our parents, human development, our mothers and fathers, and then see what could it be reflected in us. And it's gradual in nature. It cannot be suddenly making changes. It's very gradual in nature. On the other hand, the development also justifies the stability in development is through empiricist perspective, wherein psychological characteristic from early experiences cannot change, which is very true. So empiricist, which is the quantitative, researchers also emphasize that we need to know that they equally favor the the change of stability rather than something which is changed. The reason is why emphasis also follow the stability change. The reason is psychological changes that are happening at the stage of 4 5 years of life. Let's take an example. A child has gone through a huge traumatic experience at the age of 3 4 and 5. Remember, that's going to gradually impact life experiences later. So this is something which cannot be explained by change but can be explained by stability. Thus, nativist perspective also state that a shy child will grow into a shy adult who will learn sociability as per the situation demands, which is again stability. Whereas change suggests us that a shy child can either be an extrovert or an introvert, depending upon whatever the situations. We can fragment to something else. That is something which change advocates. So, this is the last issue of human development, starting from nature or nurture, and stability versus change, and continuity versus discontinuous. We need to know, when speaking of nature and nurture, which is heredity versus environment, it's an interplay in today's world. A child, a human cannot develop without the impact of genetic inheritance and the impact of the environment. So that completes with the issues and themes. Let's move to the understanding of now lifespan development. So, what is lifespan development? It aims to understand all the patterns of stability and changes in the psychological traits across the life course, with the focus of human development within the individual and between individuals. So, that lifespan development does talk about studying, researching the patterns of stability and changes that happens within the individual and amongst individual to identify individual differences. Also, Paul B. Bates, in 1939, Paul B. Bates, a German psychologist, he was a specialized individual and psychologist expert in lifespan development, perspective aging. He elaborated that the lifespan perspective is actually further following the principles, which is the principles mentioned below, are something that the lifespan actually falls upon, which is builds upon. So let's understand these principles. Remember, human development occurs throughout the lifespan. There isn't something where, when we talk about human development, having any sort of restriction. We need to know that human development occurs throughout life. It is a relatively permanent thing that keeps happening all the time. You cannot say your human development is stopped. No, it's not the quantitative change, but the qualitative experiences that we are talking about. So let's understand the principles of lifespan development that Paul Bates mentioned, that human lifespan development have some principle on which it relies on. First is lifespan and lifelong, which we just did. Like the term suggests, the first principle of lifespan development, that it goes on lifelong. It is happening throughout your life, starting from conception till the death. And the lifespan perspective asserts that there is no single age period that dominates either. So if we suggest and take, we need to understand that there isn't any stage of development which you can say is very dominating. Every stage has changes. Every stage has its own criteria of development and uniqueness and opportunities that we need to grab at each and every stage. And there are challenges equally. So remember, at the age of 1 and 2, the child has a challenge and opportunity to start walking, learning language, extended vocabulary, having the language and the thought as a base. Remember, as the child goes to 3 and 4, there needs to be a relieving of the anxiety so that the child can get into school, learn language, learn academics and education, social interaction, and social development. As the child goes to 5, 6, and 7, we need to know academic superiority happens. Child needs to develop its expertise, its likability towards the subject, social interaction expands, and then comes the teenager from 10, 11, and 12. 10, 11, and 12 is the time which is again unique in terms of identity formation. Opportunity here is to form an identity that you don't get into wrong, risky behaviors of delinquency, drugs, and addiction, but understand who you are. So, did you realize that development is lifelong? It is something which will keep going on from conception to death, and there isn't any stage which is going to dominate the other. Every stage is unique, has its own challenges, and it's lifelong. It has qualitative experiences that will make us learn and move ahead. Another thing, that development is multidimensional. Need to know, development is multidimensional. That means development doesn't only happen biologically. It's not the body which is growing all the time. It is cognitively, socially, emotionally, also cognitively moving ahead. We do not restrict ourselves to one dimension. We humans cannot get restricted to. Remember, if there's a biological development, the brain development will equally happen. The cognitive development will simultaneously happen. So remember, all of these dimensions overlap, interact with one another to account for our development at each period and each stage. So that talks about something which is development being multi-dimensional. Another example that we can understand, as the child, as a teen is an adolescent, we need to know there is striking of puberty, there is weight gains and weight changes. At the same time, there is the changes in the skin texture, the hair thinning that happens to both the genders, because they're growing up, the body is changing, there is menopause and sperm arc for the males, and menarche and sperm arc for the males, changes in the body, development of the secondary sexual characteristics. At the same time, academic taking over, psychological attributes falling into children like personality, IQ. So, do we see there's so much of development happening simultaneously? So, it is multidimensional. Then, speaking of it is multidirectional. Direction means that development does not only goes up the hill. That means you will not always be good in all the development, like social, emotional, biological, cognitive. There are times that our patterns of development are good in social but are not good in cognitive, are good biologically, but probably we have something which might not be show efficacy in another dimension. So we need to know that particular domain does not need to have to follow a linear pattern. Not all development will follow a linear pattern. That suggests that if your physical development is great, will not suggest that your cognitive development or your IQ needs to be great or your academic development needs to be great. So it follows its individual course. There can be an increment and there can be a decrement in the two simultaneous development happening. That's why it's called multi-directional. It can happen any. Some of the developments can happen to be very neutral, whereas neither too high, neither too low. Bates also mentioned a concept called selective optimization. Selective optimization means that the compensation with compensation, wherein particular functions are prioritized, thereby reducing that suggests. Let's take an example for a child. Physical development is paramount for a child who's 3 years old, walking, builds, for bone health. These are paramount. Languages. Remember, social interaction at times takes up a backseat. The child does not interact much. We usually assume the child is to be an introvert. But physical development and something which is body development and language cognitive is extremely important. So selective optimal development of selectivism and with compensation suggest that we prioritize some developments. When five things are happening, we prioritize the three and do not pay attention to the two. Like, I'll give you another example, something that we can associate as adults. As we are adults, our paramount is equally education and looking forward to job and personal relationship. For some people, maybe education and personal relationship would be something that they have optimized, but they do not pay attention to something which is job and careers. At the same time, for some people, it could be job and careers which are important, and they put the personal relationship at the back seat. So, what are we doing? We are selectively optimizing and compensating on the others. So this is something which actually suggests that yes, we are multidirectional in development. We do lose out on some and we gain in some. Also, development in plastic. This term suggests that development is actually plastic. Like a plastic can stretch. Our development is modifiable. It asserts that development can grow. It can be modified as individual variation. You could probably, with exposure, go great in your cognitive development. Your language and reading ability can get better if you're exposed to such an environment. So that is something which talk about being plastic. Development is multidisciplinary. This is such a such an important thing that we need to know. Psychology itself is multidimensional. That suggests that psychology also benefits sociology, health, and we know as health psychology is also coming into play in us in our environment. Then it is scholars says disciplines like psychology, sociology, economics, anthropology, medical science, they all contribute together to human development. Why not? Education does, social interaction does, understanding about society and socioeconomic background does. So, when talking about human development, all of these disciplines interact with one another to result to your development. Then, development is contextual, which is primarily important, I feel. Every individual develops as per the context that they're a part of. That means the situation that they are in contributes to their development. So, if they're in a situation which could be a war related situation, it will depend and it will impact them accordingly. If they're in a very liberal and economically high society, it will impact on their development differently. That's why, Western world children develop differently than Indian world children, which are Asian. So that's again contextual. We have two kinds of interaction taking and influences happening. First is normative and the other is non-normative. Normatives are events which is typical to each individual. which could be normative influences, could be age graded, history graded. It could also be on something which is common to maximum people happening together: menopause, puberty, entering to school, learning languages, walking. History graded influences also, like war, pandemic was a history graded influence to the entire world. And non-normative influences are personal, like failures in the child academic sphere, separation in the family, divorces, etc., which is particular and non-normative, not common to all. Something which cannot be normalized to everything is personal and it's non-normative. These are going to decide your context. So that is contextual. Development is equally contextual. Finishes with the principle. Let's move to individual differences. So speaking of this, this will tell us that how are individual differences happening. Remember, development is impacted by two major factors: heredity and environment, which is nature and nurture being the first issue that we started and discussed. So, human development is a very complex process. We need to know it is not a smooth process, but it's progressive. It interweaves the genetic with the environmental influences. So, we need to know that neither of the two can have a higher influence. They are working as an interplay. Like when we enmesh our hands together, remember it be enmesh when you get both your hands together at the same equal length and parts. So same is for nature and nurture. Individual develops according to their nature and also impacted by their nurture. So it is genetic inheritance is embedded in the child, which will be influenced by the environmental influences. And at times, environmental influences might be under the factors of genetic inheritance. So let's learn it and understand it. At an in-depth level. So role of inheritance talks about the fact that, at the conception, the egg and the sperm gets together, forms a zygote. Zygote is coming from a combination of 46 chromosomes, which is 23 coming from one and 23 coming from one, which makes it 46 chromosome, 46 parts of chromosome. Remember, that's how genetic inheritance happens biologically. Also, there has been numerous twin studies in the field of nature, as an identical and non-identical twins, and it was found identical twins tends to be 90.95% correlated to one another. That means children who look alike, twins, and do not have any difference amongst them, their personality intelligence tends to remain same. If they're reared together, that means if they are educated, are in the same house. Remember, there are same twins. If they're reared apart, which is reared in different households, they are still 0.75 correlative, which is 75%. They will be similar in terms of their personality, education, the way they talk to people, probably their personality in terms of extroversion, introversion, being neurotic or non-neurotic. So remember, the correlation is still very high. This actually emphasized and favored the nature, which is the genetic inheritance, that even siblings are 50% similar to one another in terms of their personality, their intelligence, their uh, the way they probably encounter and cope with situation. But at the same time, there were influences of environment which was taken into play. A new term and a new concept which came while the study of genetic inheritance were going on, which was called developmental genetics. This is a field of study that attempts to ascertain the extent to which genetics has a role to play in the lifespan development process of an individual. So this asserts that genetics has a good amount of role to play in your development, human development, and geneticists were interested in the study of how genes are transmitted to human characteristic and how family members have certain genes which are common. We all know genes do play a part. We have autosomal diseases, we have genetic diseases like Klinefelter syndromes, Down syndromes. We all remember 21st chromosome and 23rd chromosome defected in Klinefelter leads to a chromosomal disease in children. So this is again something which says that the role of nature is expansive and it's there. Then coming to the role of environmental factors, knowing that yes, there is inheritance, there is something that we are already carrying with us, will will never make us ignore that environment equally is around us. So an individual, that we all know that individuals cannot function in an isolation. Individual can be in a healthy state or deficient state, not only by their genetic inheritance, but also at times of the kind of nourishment, the kind of environment, the kind of socio-economic conditions that they're living in. So, as in our own society, the socio-economic conditions of our society tells us how the children are going to be, how intelligent, healthy, the kind of mindset all differs. That's because of the environmental factors. Then we speak about Kurt Lewin. Kurt Lewin was also a renowned psychologist. He was a German American psychologist and put out a theory. He attempted to explain how an individual action at a given time are a result of the monetary position in the social field. That means with the momentary position in the social field, sorry, which suggests that an individual's action, whatever that we do as an individual, is a result of our position in a social interaction, in a social field, in the society where we stand. So our interaction are ideally impacted by what? Our interactions are in the society. Whoever that we interact, whoever that we give out, the kind of work that we do, everything is impacted by the positions that we hold in a social environment, in a social context. Also, Kurt Lewin gave us a huge equation, something which is very famous right from the beginning. This is the contribution of Kurt Lewin, which suggested that behavior is a result of interaction between the personality, which is the person, and the environment, which I feel certainly is very true when it comes to the environmental factors, because behavior of an individual is a result of how the person interacts with the environment that they are in. So this was a huge, expression which was given by Kurt Lewin, which supported environmental psychology. Now, in the support of environmental psychology came a theory which was called the ecological theory of Durganand Sinha. He was an Indian psychologist. He was a psychoanalyst, ideally, of Indian society and Indian context. He gave us a theory of human development of children in Indian context. So this is only referring to children in India. The context is within India, which is the kind of the kind of influences and environmental changes would be something which is restricted to our culture. And he stated that a child is in grouped by two layers. These two layers are the upper and more visible, and the supporting and surrounding layer. So he stated that a child grows within these two layers. With the child at the is in the center, then we have the supporting surrounding layer, and then we have the upper and the more visible layer. So there are just two layers that the child is engulfed in, and they actually develop on the basis of these. So let's understand what all these layers are comprising of and how does the ecological part, which is the environmental factor, influences development. Need to know Durganand Sinha was a developmental psychologist. He was pioneered in the parental styles, how parenting can impact the development of a child. He stated this model and stated that there are the following layers. The upper layer refers to the more visible layer. The upper is the more visible layer. That's something we all can see. And this involves interaction in home, school, and peers. The school comprises of the kind of school it is. It is a CBSE school. Is it a government school? The two-tiered school. How many school is it? How famous the school is? The kind of facilities the school provide. The kind of faculty, learning, fee, everything in the school. The social interaction, the child, the curricular and co-curricular activity that school provides. So that's the administration, the management, everything of the school is something which is in the upper and the more visible layer. Then we come to homes. Homes talks about the home is of what kind? Is it an individual, or we talk about both physiologically and ecologically. Like structurally, where is the home? Is it a joint family, a nuclear family? How many siblings are there? The kind of interaction that happens in home, what kind of responsibility a child is given in the house, and the kind of food, the living, the livability, all is included in the house. Then we come to the peer structure. Peer again a very important, that's a very important aspect. That's why it's included in the more visible and the upper layer. It will talk about the kind of peer relationship. Where are these peers coming from? So when we speak about where are these peers coming from, talks about the number of friend group. The friend group are from the school. Are they from the place that you're living in? Are there extended part? How many number of years they are friends from? The kind of peer interaction that we have, is it facilitated or is it something which is inhibiting your development? That is something which is the upper and the visible layer. Now coming to supportive and surrounding layer. This talks about the geographical, physical and institutional factors like the caste, the class, the communities, the race that we are a part of, the culture and the religion that we are, the position that we hold as an individual in the society, our status, stratification in the class. So this is something which is more surrounding us, more closer to us. I'll tell you how. How is our name identified as? It depicts your caste, class, and your religion. It depicts the resources, the community that you're coming from. the values that you hold. So that is more personal, is something that we are in more engrooved. Every activity that you do is impacted by your caste class, is impacted by the community area that you're living in, the community resources that you're providing as per the society, the position that you hold. Let's take an example. An individual is working in an amazing company. Remember, the surrounding layer is going to be the position that individual holds in the company, the community resources that the individual gets, the stratification, which is the position in terms of the designation the individual hold, and then comes the more visible layer, the house that he or she is coming from, the kind of peers that they have, the kind of schooling that they had. Schooling has happened 10 years back. So the supportive and the surrounding layers tend to be these. Remember, these are micro level factors comprising of both physical and social environment, which has direct, indirect, mostly indirect influences on the child's development. Like the role of the teacher is necessary for a for children to grasp the formalization of life, to acquire new skills, etc. Also, in Western education, the role of peers, teachers, and homes develop the cognitive abilities, allows flexible thinking. That's why teaching in the outside world is so different. Then that turns out to be the more visible in upper layer. Then, therefore, we need to know that the Durganand Sinha's ecological model represent the development of children in an Indian context, which is culture that is Indian. Now, as the image, the upper layer comprises of the family, the home environment, the peer groups that we are a part of, the nature and the quality of the school. As I said, is the school a public school? It's a government school. The facilities in the school. Then we come to the surrounding layer. It's the geographical condition of your house. Where is its situation? The environment of the place that you're a part of, the culture that you hold, the religion, the belief, the stratification, the caste, the class that we hold, the social system that we hold. So these are something which does engulfs us at a greater level. Then that finishes a theory that supported and impacted human development along with environment. The reason that we held this responsible in the times in the nurture part was because ecological factors are mostly environmental factors that we just suggested. And this has been a very renowned theory of Durganand Sinha. He's a psychoanalysis. After we finish the unit 2, let's move to developmental theories. This is unit 3 of PPCS 184, school psychology. This will talk about all the developmental theories, the approaches of cognitive development, theories of language development also. We are going to talk about theories of psychological development, that will talk about moral development, Kohlberg, Jean Piaget, and ecological systems theory, which is the same theory opposite Durganand Sinha. Durganand Sinha's theory in the ecological system was an Indian context, and the other systems theory is global concept. So let's understand what does the human development in the field talks about. What do they aim? The field of human development aims to study individuals across different lifespan, different ages, along with their similarities and differences quoted together. So it aims to describe the intra-individual differences and also the inter-individual differences. It explains why the changes are happening, how a changes is happening, and how the society changes are impacting individual. So we need to understand the aim, the main context of human development is to understand the individual intra and inter differences and how an individual develops, and also to modify these changes and make it optimal, something which is adequate for our development. Remember, we do not want in our environment, if we give an example, an individual child who's 6'5". We need a child whose height and growth, which is healthy. The health is optimal, which is not too much and too less. Adequacy is the key even in human development. That's why individual differences are found in our society. That what is the mid path, the optimal development that we are looking forward to. Now, moving ahead to developmental theories that we have. Developmental theories started at the time of mid 20th century. There was a surge of developmental theories. There are numerous theories that have been quoted by psychologists, renowned psychologists, to have an establishment of human development, to make us understand that how does it happen in a formal discipline. Is it discontinuous or continuous? That is, it's happening in stages or not in stages. Some theories have been prominent, and some theories have just been read and not followed much. Some has been followed in an in-depth course of human development. So we start with something which has had a prominent impact on human development, which is one of the most important and first approaches of cognitive development. That is Jean Piaget. Jean Piaget, Jean Piaget was a French psychologist, and he was pioneered for theoretical contribution that he did to human development. He has extensively studied the cognitive development of humankind and made us understand that how cognition is an important aspect of us, and without that, it's difficult to grow, understand the world around us. Also, speaking of that, the field of cognitive development has been pioneered by Jean Piaget. He's been a French psychologist. Giving a little introduction, as we see the image here, remember Jean Piaget stated that the cognitive development, let's understand what is cognitive. Cognition is the ability to think, reason, understand. Simply the process of knowing. Knowing includes everything: thought processes, reading, problem solving, decision making, creative thinking, etc. So he stated that the cognitive development in children happens in stages. The first stage becomes the base for the second becomes the base for the third. So every stage is distinctive. Something which is happening in the stage one will not happen in the stage two. And also, he mentioned that something that you miss in stage one will obviously cause us some deficiency in our development, which will make us lag behind the milestones. Milestones are what? The developmental stages have a virtue that needs to be completed, a quality that needs to be completed. So milestones are those quality that every stage has. So he mentioned if one stage is not able to be completed well, it will impact the development of the next. So yes, it is both distinctive and continuous, which is it is discontinuous and continuous. Continuous, the prior will impact the latter will impact the further latter, but it is distinct in stages. Also, he stated that development happens in stages starting from zero and goes on till the teenage, which is it happens till 16 years of life. Cognition is developed by that time. After that, cognition is just getting like, speaking of intellect, like the IQ of an individual, which is the brain cells increase now. In the earlier time, a decade back, it was 18 years of life, but now the brain cells increase till 20 years of life. So after that, there's a stagnation. It's the wisdom, it's the experiences that takes hold of. It's not the knowledge that you can grasp and fill in your bottle as much. It's the wisdom. So did he say that 16 years of life, by that time, we are done with cognitive development. It's only the learning, the processing which happens later. Starting with stage one, which was called the sensory motor, from zero to two. This, like the term suggests, talks about that development happens on the basis of motor, motor development. Your base is motor reflexes that tells your senses that this is what a child needs. So the coordination of senses with motor responses, sensory curiosity about the world has been satiated through motor responses. That's why reflexes come into play, like yawning, crying, blinking of an eye. All of these things in the child at the early 0 to 2 years of life is extremely important. Language is used for demands of for demands in cataloging, which is children usually use start using language by the end of 2 years. Object permanence is at the verge of development, which is 1 year's object permanence is not there. Explain you the concept of object permanence. Simple concept. It means the permanency of the object in front of the child develops by 2 years, 2 years and latter, which is the child understand that the object that is hidden continues to stay. That's the reason when you enjoy peekaboo with children, they enjoy the age of 6 months and 9 months. After 1 plus, the children do not enjoy peekaboo because they remember it's your face. You don't go away. Whereas 0, 1, 2, 3, 10 months, 11, 18 months children are difficult to understand. You show them something, hide them, they will feel the thing is gone. They are not able to articulate that the things that is being hidden persist to exist. So object permanence is formed by the age of 2. Then happens to be pre-operational. Pre-operational is the second stage, goes on from 2 to 7. Pre-operational talks about two things happening, which is symbolic thinking, and at the same time, we have intuitive thinking. Symbolic thinking talks about using of syntax, grammar to express concepts. Then there is, we have magical lifelike plays that children rely on. That's why they play with imaginary things, they have imaginary friends. Imagination and intuition is very strong. By the 7 years of life, there is intuitive thinking that comes in, which is complex abstraction comes in, which is child is now able to think complexly vague items, thoughts which are very vague, and they are continuing with thoughts which are difficult. That's why at this point of time children start asking us too many questions. They're very inquisitive by the age of 6 and 7. Why it is so why it's 7 at night in summers and it's still sunny? Why doesn't it happen in winters? Whenever it rains, why does it get so dark? Where is the rainwater coming from? So why there are 12 months in a year? So you probably have so many questions because they're getting intuitive. Their abstraction is increasing at this point of time. Conservation starts developing at this point of time. Conservation that suggests that children are able to understand that anything that goes in a 1 liter bottle can get into a 1 liter jug of different shape. A clay which is round can be made into two cylindrical clay parts. So they understand the concept of mass, volume, and shapes. Coming to concrete operational, 7 to 11 is the time that they're in the middle childhood, a time which is concrete situation. They are very analytical. Academics comes into play. They're able to read time, understand space, quantify almost everything. They even quantify relationships at this point of time. They make friends on the basis of how much do you do for me, do you stand up for me, etc. They're very strongly applied to scientific thought and not on independent. Abstraction is a little lesser at this point of time. They're very concrete. That's why it's called concrete operational. Then we come to something which is formal operation, which is the teenager and the last where the cognitive development is complete. Here, children are very theoretical. They know the worldly vices, gone through theories, understood by 18, 17. They're very hypothetical also. That's why the make beliefs keep happening in their mind. They think if my friend calls me, I will talk to her like this, say this. If she says that, it's all hypothetically happening. Because of this hypothetical situation, they become very deductive, which is they can come to alternative situations, alternative solutions, and counterfactual thinking happens. They're very abstract in terms of their logic and reasoning. They can come give you multiple answers. Strategy and planning becomes very possible because they can understand, hypothetically make situations and make steps. So they're very strategic, very planning oriented. Concepts are learned and one concepts can be applied to the other. That's why they have subjects like psychology, sociology, physics, which can be applied later, applied maths, which could be applied billing. So this is something that finishes with cognitive development of Jean Piaget, pioneer an amazing theory to understand how cognition happens. Opposite and a revolt, not exactly revolt, a dissected opinion came of Vygotsky. Vygotsky said it does not stage. Human development cannot happen in stages, and according to Jean Piaget, children do not need support from the environment. And whereas Lev Vygotsky, a Soviet psychologist, Russian psychologist, stated that cognition develops with the support of an elder individual. So while Piaget laid emphasis on the importance of interaction of the child with objects, which is not the surrounding but the objects for the development of cognition, Vygotsky stated that social interaction and skill adults and peers are needed for child development. So do we see the contrasting here? Piaget comes with the thought that for cognition, we do not need people. We just need the child. Child has the capacity to grow from one stage to the other on their own. And at the same time, they can, capacity to grow on their own. And at the same time, they interact with the objects, learn on their own and move ahead. Vygotsky denied this concept. He said children cannot grow on their own. They need social interaction with skilled adults and peers. That's what happens in school, I feel. So, cognitive development is evidenced in children through a process called scaffolding. Scaffolding is a process that involves highly skilled learners that are helping the low skilled learners. Highly skilled could be teachers, siblings, elders, and the low learners are children, followed with a gradual withdrawal of the help which is extended to the slow learner, which is the low skilled learner, which is the child, and then the child becomes on their own. It is simply trying to say scaffolding is a process where you are supported by teachers, and with the passage of time, you learn that skill, and they move away with the passage of time, and you do it on their own. So it's like cycling. Your sibling or your parent guides you to how to cycle, and with the passage of time, their support declines, and you do it on their own. So this is what was process of scaffolding given by Vygotsky. Also, a zone of proximal development was another concept given by Vygotsky. Stated ZPD is defined as a distance between the child's actual development when they are assessed by individual problem solving and when they are guided by higher level of potential individuals. So the gap between the development is the zone of proximal development. So he said, what can child learn alone and the difference of what can a child learn with adult, that distance is called the zone of proximal development. He stated that the the highly skilled learner, which are the teachers, adults, come with a lot of things. They come with encouragement, motivation, a lot of modeling happens, explanation, guidance with prompts, so many items and tools that they use to teach children, a lot of transfer of learning that tends to happen. So competency based learners that comes in. So he stated, as the we see the image, the child's current understanding, see the zone of proximal distance and currently beyond the reach. So if you do not get an assistance according to Vygotsky, the children do not extend to beyond reach concepts, which is something which is exceptional concepts. A very different thought process, but does make sense. When we see Piaget's concept of development and equally Lee Vygotsky, they both make sense. Because yes, children are at times very capable of doing things on their own, but the zone of proximal development, which is the ZPDs, the gap that children might have when they're learning alone and when they have a support of an adult, the teacher, the guidance, it's far more different. So the both of the things I feel stands accurately effective and needful, because there isn't anything that we are not able to do alone. At times we are able to do a lot of things alone, and a lot of things tends to happen with people only and without people. So this is something that I feel when we talk about development happens together. All of that happens together. Then moving ahead is another theory that talks about Bruner's idea of knowledge acquisition, which is Jerome Bruner was another American developmental psychologist, introduced the ideas of Vygotsky only into the Western scholars. So Bruner was somebody who was also a psychologist of thinking. He gave the concept of creativity, and he was an American psychologist who introduced the Vygotsky's thought, the same thought of Vygotsky, extended it to the Western world. So he combined many of the Vygotsky and Piaget's concept together and gave rise to three forms of knowing, which is the inactive representation, the iconic, and obviously the symbolic knowledge. So let's go through the image and take an example also. So what is the inactive representation, which uses action? Knowledge which is based in doing and things that you know how to do. So enacting and learning. Then there's iconic, which is shown visual imagery, PowerPoint presentation, videos, etc. A lot of videos along with it. Lastly, symbolic, which is based on language transmitted through the culture, which is making it explain in a lecture method and associated it to the culture that we are a part of. These form knowledge, being partially overlapped, which is all of these three things. These three forms of knowing is important, which is iconic, echoic, and symbolic. So speaking inactive, iconic, and symbolic. For example, let's take an example. When learning a sport like surfing or probably cricket, inactive representation is very important. Telling the child how to hold the bat, how to have a surfboard below you. So that is equally important. Then at the same time, showing them what does a surfboard and cricket bat would look like will enable the person to imagine and learn the sport on the water. On the other hand, once the person learns surfing, they might improve the performance by visualizing other experts, realizing how it will happen in an ocean, how will it happen in a river. Similarly, when it happens in cricket, I'm at the moment playing cricket in my locality. When the ground goes bigger, I play a state level. So that's again symbolic. The symbols and presentation, language and imagination, all of this is needed. So verbal feedback as well as the verbal feedback on the performance is important. Let's take the image to have a better idea. See, inactive learning through movements and action, playing with a book. Then iconic is learning through images, which is looking at the pictures in the book. Symbolic learning through research, reading and imagining it in different cultures, which is abstracting your thought, making a more abstract, vague, along with theoretical. So again, Bruner's concept was equally applicable today. If we see, I think cognition learning can happen through a lot of these theories. An amalgamation of probably all the three, or probably restricting to one according to our culture. Then coming to information processing model that we speak of, and information processing model is something that we should look in, not only for cognition. I feel this is a process of thinking, memorizing, etc. This was given by Atkinson and Schifrin, a very effective model. This is also called the stage model. Again, the stage theories, stage models are telling us that this is a distinctive issue, that theories are working in stages. So information processing model came at the time of attention and memory. And it is a memory model. It looks like how information is received from the environment, how does it happens to go from one stage to the other, and then it's retrieved well. Attention processes, maintenance, and elaborate rehearsals. All of these are strategies that make information move from the short term and long term memory. So before we get into and dive into this model, let's understand we have three kinds of memory: sensory, short term, long term. Sensory memory is the memory which happens to come from senses, which is all the five senses. Anything that impinges your senses, which could be sound, images, taste, smell, etc., is sensory. Sensory is very short lived, hardly fraction of seconds, has a capacity of quite a lot. We can see a lot of things in a day, but the duration is very less. It's less than a fraction of second. If you attend to this sensory memory, let's go according to the model. The next type of memory is the short term memory. Short term is the more functional and working memory, better than the sensory because it's larger span, 30 second. Duration is 7 plus minus, duration is 30 seconds, and span is 7 plus minus 2, which is you can hold approximately 7 to 8 to 10 things here. You need to attend to sensory information, then the information will go to short term. So if you do not attend to a color, that will not go to your short term. It will be forgotten, decayed and gone, right? And if you tend to remember it, attend to it, it comes to the short term. Short term tries to maintain it in two ways: either keep recalling it, which is restating it in the mind. Elaborate is checking out in the internet, finding what color it was, what is it, orange or a tangerine, the new sort of colors that we have. So that is working onto it. This makes your short term memory move the information. Once you maintain it, rehearse, or elaborately rehearse. Rehearsal is you keep regularizing and speaking to yourself, revising it. It moves to long term memory. If you do not rehearse or anything, the color goes away from your mind. A color that you saw today, probably you're not able to recall it. You will forget it completely. If rehearsed well, goes to the long term memory. Long term memory is duration wise vast. It's vast in every ways. Duration span lifelong, stays there for life, and it's only forgotten if there is an interference, if there's a memory overload, too many things happening in a day, there is interference of the old and the new information, or at times when you do not have retrieval cues, that do you have to remember the color here or something else. So when cues are missing. So only that how this model functions. Remember, infants have a capacity, for instance, to be able, in the early times, only to differentiate between a familiar and unfamiliar faces. They don't recall you by names, please. They can only recall you by familiarity, 5 to 6 months. Children in preschools, go ahead. Now they have better memory, their sensory information is better. So now they're able to move information to the short term. And they have to rehearse a lot of time that they move it to long term. Preschools may not be aware of the strategies of rehearsing, but the teachers make them do it. Also, episodic memory supports them at times. Anything that happens in form of episode and memory, they'll remember it. And at times children learn through procedure, like cycle is learned through procedural memory. So if the short term memory of children do not have the rehearsals as strategies, they can use the types of memory. Like episodic is something that an episode that has happened, a personal life event. Procedural memory would be something which things happening in a sequence and procedure. Cycle learning is a procedure, bicycle learning is a procedure, so they'll remember it. And as the child goes ahead, which is child moves to a middle and a later childhood, remember meta memory happens where now the child knows all the strategy, the long-term memory, short-term memory, sensory memories are equally important. Language development is there, and that's how information is processed in us. So this is another way that tells us how cognition function in us. So all of the theories make sense, I feel. It's just that the context, the culture, and the emphasis changes, and the use of the theory changes in individuals. That completes with first few chunk of cognitive development theories that we have done. We will continue with the same unit that will talk about developmental theories per se. Thank you.